They thought we were monsters. I remember exactly where I was when the transmission came through. We were drifting on the edge of the Drixian cloud, running silent drills aboard the UHS Thanatos. The ship groaned like it always did, old steel wrapped around even older tech, patched and welded with bits of Terran grit and desperation. The Thanatos was one of the original Deathworld Fleet ships, forged during the Exodus, and still bore the scars of conflicts that weren't even in Council history books. We weren't expecting anything more than routine maintenance cycles and a week of stale rations. Then the emergency broadwave hit us. 17 layers deep in encryption, yet sloppily encoded. That's how we knew it was real. No military precision, no political polish. Just raw panic. It cut across every channel, overriding our internal comms, and the voice that came through wasn't human. "This is Regent Vural of the Threx Dominion," it stammered. "Requesting immediate asylum. We are under planetary siege. Our world is dying. Please, save us. Save our children." The voice cracked. Not with static, but with emotion. The Threx, those bastards, were proud and condescending to a fault. For centuries they'd treated us like a feral backwater species. Too brutal, too chaotic, too Terran. And now one of their regents was on his knees, begging. We stood there in silence on the bridge, the crew frozen mid-motion. Someone dropped a data pad. Another whispered something under their breath. Might have been a prayer, might have been a curse. Even Captain Renii didn't speak for several heartbeats. When she finally did, her voice was low, like she was afraid of waking something up. What the hell did that to the Threx? No one answered. Because none of us had a clue. It wasn't just the message, it was what came with it. Attached to the transmission were biosignatures, environmental scans, emergency med packets, and planetary data. The readouts showed levels of atmospheric destabilization that shouldn't have been possible. Cities turned to craters. Entire oceans evaporated. Radiation spikes, tectonic disruption, atmospheric collapse. It didn't look like war. It looked like the Threx homeworld had given up. They didn't even send coordinates. They just screamed into the void, hoping someone would hear. And somehow, they chose us. I remember looking out the viewport at the stars beyond, wondering what kind of terror makes the most arrogant species in the galaxy reach out to their oldest enemies. What force could push an empire into extinction, drive them to beg the Deathworlders for help? And maybe the darker question, what made them think we could do anything about it? But the moment that voice asked us to save their children, I knew something deep in my gut. We would answer. Because when no one else listens, when the galaxy turns its back, humanity never does. We don't forget what it means to be left behind. We are the monsters. But we're also the ones who show up. And God help whatever made the Threx afraid. Because now, they'd called us. We jumped in blind, against every protocol, every advisory from the Council, every cold voice on the interstellar net warning us to stay away. Captain Renii gave the order without hesitation, her voice steel-sharp, "Jump to Threx Prime. Full fleet." The moment the jump drive fired, the deck shuddered. I gripped the console as the stars bent and broke around us, my stomach flipping like it always did during slipstream transitions. But even then, something felt wrong. The Thanatos had made thousands of jumps without issue. This one felt colder, thinner, as if space itself was holding its breath. And then we arrived. What we saw shouldn't have been possible. The Threx homeworld was supposed to be a jewel, a center of civilization, culture, and power. But it was a shadow of itself. A dark, choking thing hung in orbit, the wreckage of orbital platforms, shattered satellites, debris spiraling like frozen blood in zero-G. The planet below wasn't blue and green, it was gray and bleeding red. Storm systems raged across continents, massive dust clouds covering entire landmasses. Fires still burned where cities had once stood, though no life stirred within them. The biosphere was collapsing in real time, like we were watching a planet take its final breath. Even the AI went quiet for a second when the data streamed in. I'd seen war zones. I'd walked the acid rain plains of New Glasgow. I'd pulled comrades out of firebombed bunkers during the Warglen uprising. But this was annihilation. And it had happened fast. No signs of orbital bombardment. No trace of enemy fleets. Just death. Instant and total. That's when we picked up the signals. Hundreds of them. Tiny, flickering beacons from orbital bunkers and life pods, all broadcasting one thing: alive. Please. Help. We moved fast. The Thanatos deployed 2 drop teams. I was on Alpha 1. We docked with a ruptured Threxian station, half the hull gone, atmosphere bleeding into the void, but still enough power to keep some sections running. What we found inside broke me a little. They weren't soldiers. They weren't leaders. They were families. Scientists. Younglings. Elders too frail to run. They were packed into hallways, clinging to one another. Starving. Cold. Some barely alive. A little Threx girl reached for my hand as we moved through the evac corridor. Her skin was mottled blue-gray, and her breathing rasped through a cracked rebreather. She looked up at me with eyes too old for her age. "Are you a human?" she asked. I nodded, kneeling down. "Yeah, kid. I'm human." She exhaled, a small, broken sound. Then tears, real ones, started to leak from the corners of her eyes. She collapsed into me, her tiny arms clinging to my armor. And that's when I understood something awful. Whatever did this to them didn't come to conquer. It came to erase. And they'd rather take their chances with us, humanity, the Deathworlders, the devils of the stars, than face whatever was still out there. That was the first time I felt fear, not for us, but for the whole galaxy. Because the Threx had run to the monsters they once condemned. And they did it for a reason. We weren't supposed to take them. That was clear the moment we started docking the escape pods and stabilizing life support across the fleet. The Council had long-standing rules against contaminated evacuations, especially from Class Z extinction events. But Captain Renei didn't wait for authorization. She invoked Protocol Omega, something so ancient, so rarely used, I didn't even know it still existed in our systems. Full override. No outside input. The fleet became its own sovereign power under the flag of survival. The Thanatos and her sister ships reconfigured within hours. Cargo bays were converted into emergency habitats, med bays overclocked, food synthesizers recalibrated to suit Threxian biology. It was all hands on deck. Engineers, Marines, even AI cores pitched in to stabilize the rescued. Still, some humans hesitated. Not all of us were ready to forgive the Threx for what they'd done. I overheard the grumbling. "Let him die," one deckhand spat. "They called us monsters for centuries. Now they want our help." Another responded bitterly, "Funny how quick the proud come crawling when the fire touches their homes." But others remembered the solar collapse, when Earth begged the Council for aid and got nothing but silence. We remembered being left to die. We remembered watching our oceans boil and our sky catch fire, and no one came. That's why we helped. Because we knew what it meant to be abandoned. I spent hours in one of the makeshift habitats, checking vitals, handing out nutrient packs. The Threx wouldn't meet my eyes at first. Even broken, their pride clung to them like armor. But the children changed everything. They smiled when they saw us. They touched our rough skin, asked about our strange eyes, our odd voices. To them, we weren't monsters. We were hope. Then we found the logs. They were stored in a shattered black box from a Threxian dreadnought recovered by the UHS Omen. It took 2 AIs and a cyber specialist to decrypt the data. When it finally streamed across our command displays, everyone on the bridge went silent. The footage showed the Threx fleet in orbit, fully armed, fully powered. Then, nothing. Not a fight. Not even an enemy. Just a distortion, like reality itself had folded in on one point. Ships began to disappear, vanishing from space as if they were erased. One moment they were there, next gone. No explosion. No debris. Just consumed. Ruin-class anomaly, the logs labeled it. Exo Z14. I stared at those words for what felt like hours. Not a fleet. Not a weapon. Not a species. An anomaly. Something ancient. Something without language, form, or purpose, at least not one we could understand. The Threx hadn't lost a war. They'd been devoured by something the universe forgot to name. And now, we had their survivors on board. Part of me wanted to feel safe, that we were far enough. that it was over. But deep down, I knew the truth. EXO Z14 wasn't finished, and we had just become the next page in whatever history it was writing. We called it the Silence. It was the only word that came close to capturing what we saw in the Threxian datalogs, what the survivors tried to explain but couldn't. Not a species, not a machine, not an invasion force. Just absence. A void wrapped in hunger. The logs were fragmented, most of them corrupted, data warped by whatever energy the anomaly emitted. But one file played clearly. It came from a scout frigate positioned at high orbit during the first wave. A clean visual feed, at first. Planet in the background, calm stars all around. Then, distortion. At first, just static crawling across the edges of the screen. Sensors picked up gravitational anomalies, background radiation fluctuations. The crew spoke, nervous but calm. Then the stars behind the planet began to vanish. Not move, vanish star. Like someone had taken an eraser to the night. They launched a probe toward the phenomenon. It never transmitted back. Moments later, everything shorted. Lights. Comm links. The ship's AI. And in that final moment, the video feed caught something impossible. A dark sphere, massive, slow-moving, with no heat signature, no defined shape. Not even black. Just wrong. A perfect absence of everything. Then the feed ended. No explosion. No screaming. Just silence. The Threx didn't even have time to fight. Their dreadnoughts were torn apart without a single return shot fired. Their orbital defense grid, one of the most advanced in the sector, went offline in less than a minute. They called it an EXO Z14 Ruin-class event. Classified in their archives as a hypothetical extinction force, cosmic in scale, probably non-sentient, absolutely unstoppable. But it got worse. The survivors began reporting visions. Not dreams, visions. A child from Bunker 3A on the Thanatos collapsed during routine medical screening. Her neural scan spiked so hard our equipment nearly fried. When she woke, she looked me dead in the eye and whispered, "It's still hungry." Another boy drew star maps, ones we couldn't recognize. Deep void sectors. Places no known civilization had charted. He said the silence came from beyond the weave, where time doesn't work right and matter doesn't matter. One elder Threxian, barely clinging to life, pulled Captain Renei aside and said something that chilled all of us. It didn't attack us because it hates us. It doesn't even know what we are. It's feeding. We were just next. But then came the worst part. A single fragment buried in the corrupted logs, hidden under multiple failsafe layers. A message marked urgent, written by a Threxian xenohistorian named Valet. It recognized our ships, the file read. It changed direction when it scanned our Terran alloys. It hesitated. Not because it feared us, but because it remembered. Remembered. What the hell does something like that remember about humanity? I stared at that message long after the others left. My hands were cold. My mouth dry. That wasn't just fear in my chest. It was the sinking feeling that we'd crossed paths with this thing before. And whatever it was, it hadn't forgotten us. The Council denounced us within hours of the news breaking. Their transmission was cold, rehearsed, and empty of empathy. A polished ambassador with a perfect smile appeared on every fleet comm channel, her voice echoing through our halls like an afterthought. Human Fleet Command has violated Intergalactic Refuge Protocol 49C by granting asylum to non-allied species from a quarantine-class world. You have endangered your own systems and compromised the peace we've maintained for 1,000 cycles. You will receive no aid from the Council. Then the message cut. Captain Renei didn't even blink. "Good," she muttered. "We don't need them." And she was right. We never needed the Council. We'd only ever tolerated them. They left us to rot after Earth's biosphere collapsed during the solar flares. When the oceans boiled and crops turned to ash, the Council debated our fate from the comfort of pristine orbital cities. They called us a statistical loss. We became the desperate, the stubborn, the survivors. And we never forgot. Now, once again, the rest of the galaxy was turning its back. But this time, we weren't the ones begging. This time, We were the only ones standing. So we did what humanity always does. We got ready. The Deathworld Fleet had been coasting in low alert mode for decades. With the Threx on board and the silence on our trail, that changed overnight. Full war doctrine was activated. That doesn't just mean prepping guns. It means turning every ship into a floating fortress. We reawakened the Foundry AI buried deep within the Thanatos, the one that ran during the first collapse. The damn thing started churning out parts and armor like it had been waiting for this day. Entire cargo holds were turned into modular armories. Civilians, both human and Threx, volunteered to train. We shared tactics. Combat modules. Terran gravblades were issued to Threxian honor guards. They taught us how to enhance shielding with their biosymbiotic tech. In days, we had hybrid weapons, Threx plasma fused with Terran kinetics. It wasn't just integration. It was evolution. Even the children were learning. Human and Threx kids played together in converted recreation bays, drawing what they remembered of the silence. One girl, no older than 10, drew a black sphere with thousands of tiny white lines pointing inward. When asked what it was, she said, "That's where the stars go to die." I couldn't sleep after that. And then came the Titans. Most people think humanity's Titans are a myth. War machines the size of cities, built when Earth still had ice caps. Only a few were ever completed before they were sealed away. But the Thanatos held one in its vault. Borealis Unit 7. We sent a signal. It answered. The old beast began to wake, groaning as stasis systems cracked and ancient metal screamed back to life. Its AI greeted us in a voice like thunder through rusted lungs. Asterisk status. War resumed. Adversary detected. Designation. Unknown. Engaging survival protocol. Asterisk. And for the first time in generations, I felt it. That insane Terran fire lighting up inside every one of us. They called us monsters. Now they'd see why. It came for us. Not in a wave of ships. Not with banners or threats or the ceremonial pomp the council species so loved. No, the silence came the same way it always did, without warning, without noise, and without mercy. One moment, our sector was empty. The next, everything changed. It didn't appear on our sensors at first. That was the worst part. Our long-range scans picked up distortions, sudden gravitational spikes like black holes blooming and collapsing in microseconds. AI systems stuttered, caught in loops, then rebooted with cold, terrified diagnostics. One even tried to shut itself down permanently, claiming external reality mismatch, entity not classifiable. Captain Renei gave the order instantly. Defensive formation. All combat units, full readiness. Wake the Titans. No one questioned her. No one asked why. We'd all seen the logs. We all knew what was coming. And then we saw it. The stars blinked out. One by one. And not from movement, asterisk from erasure star. The silence approached not as an object, but as an absence. Space folded around it, bent and tore. Even light refused to exist in its presence. Ships stationed on the edge of the fleet simply disappeared. No alarms. No distress calls. Just void. But we didn't run. Humanity never runs. Our fleet fired first. Quantum lances, plasma disruptors, void shell torpedoes. Threxian war tech fused with Deathworlder madness. For a brief moment, it looked like we might hold. Explosions lit the darkness. We saw feedback, energy ripples, as if the silence reacted. Then came the backlash. 3 of our cruisers crumpled like foil under a force none of us could define. One Titan, Atlas Unit 3 *, was caught in a gravitational sinkhole so sudden, its fusion core imploded in silence, taking 20,000 souls with it. Still we held. We brought every weapon, every tactic, every ounce of rage and desperation to bear. Borealis Unit 7 led the charge, its cannons firing planet-cracking rounds. The Threx fought beside us, fearless. Their former arrogance had become something sharper now, purpose. They knew they had no world left. But maybe here, they could earn something more. I fought too. Aboard an EVA rig, manually targeting a rail repeater mounted to the Thanatos' outer hull. My arms shook from the recoil, eyes burning from light distortions, but I didn't stop. And then, something changed. The silence flinched. We didn't destroy it, not even close, but it hesitated. As if sensing, for the first time, true resistance. Not just strength. Defiance. We weren't like the others. We weren't prey. We were predators who had clawed our way back from extinction. The kind of species that burned its own skies just to win a war. After hours of combat, the anomaly shifted. And then, it left. Gone. No explosion. No retreat vector. Just the slow return of light, and the agonizing weight of silence in its absence. We'd survived. Barely. The dead were still being counted. The living too stunned to cry. But we had done something no other species had managed. We made the silence bleed. And it would remember us for it. It didn't come back, not immediately, anyway. After the silence vanished, we floated among wreckage and ghosts. We lost 6 ships. 2 Titans. Thousands of lives, human and Threx alike. The void outside looked like a god had taken a bite out of the stars. But we were still here. We won, not in the sense that we destroyed it. We couldn't even begin to grasp what it was, let alone kill it. But we did something else. We survived it. We stood against the thing that consumed worlds, and we didn't break. That was victory enough for now. In the aftermath, something strange happened. The Threx survivors, once scattered across our fleet in isolated refugee modules, started integrating fully. Not because we told them to, but because they chose to. I saw Threx children wearing Terran fleet patches. Saw human engineers and Threx scientists poring over fusion schematics together. In one corridor, I passed a Threx elder teaching meditation to a group of exhausted human marines. They weren't guests anymore. They were family. And as the days passed, as we rebuilt our wounded fleet and honored our dead, it hit me, they didn't ask us for protection. They asked us for a place to belong. They came to us because they knew we were the only ones who understood loss that deep, fear that heavy. Because humanity isn't just strong, we're familiar with horror. With crawling back from the edge. And now they were learning from us, not just how to fight, but how to live after fighting. We granted them full asylum, officially this time. The council protested again, of course, but no one listened. Not even their own fringe species. Our comms lit up with encrypted pings, other races watching in silence, wondering if maybe the monsters from Earth weren't monsters after all. One night, if you could call it that in deep space, I stood on the Thanatos upper observation deck. The stars were quieter now, like they, too, were recovering. The little Threx girl I'd rescued on that first mission came up beside me. She wore a human jacket 2 sizes too big, a patch sewn onto the sleeve, a firebird rising through smoke. "I had another dream," she said softly. I looked down at her, feeling that old chill return. "About it." She shook her head. "About us. Fighting it. Again. But next time, we're not alone." I didn't know what to say. But I believed her. Because deep down, I think the galaxy is beginning to understand something it has spent millennia denying. You don't call humanity when you want diplomacy. You call us when you want the darkness to bleed. The Threx weren't the last to come to us. Not by a long shot. The silence is still out there. Waiting. Watching. Remembering. And when it returns, it won't just face humans. It'll face every species that chose to stand with us. Because we are the Deathworld Fleet. And we never kneel. Not to gods. Not to monsters. Not to the void.